Thank you very much. I wonder if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. And I think this kind of discussion is so much needed for counteracting far-right extremisms and any forms of extremisms. And I would like to share my screen. I have got a very simple PowerPoint that you can all see where I am at the moment. And I would like to start with, thanking that all the support you gave the Central European University. And you can, of course, ask the question, why on earth she's speaking here, why she's a 3 times loser. I mean, see, you had to move from one European Union country to another. The gender studies program had been deleted from the accredited study list. And also she had to resign from the Hungarian Accreditation Committee. But I would like to somehow signal that all these bad stories need a certain reflection and also a kind of understanding. And I have a paper, and I would like to go through that. And here you see the different points I would like to make. So the paper consists of 2 parts. One is a theoretical part, and the other one is a case study, which is the reproductive rights, about reproductive rights. And I'm sure that when you saw the title of the paper, you might have Googled, what the heck is this polypore? So in the abstract, you find the link to the article where I'm actually referring to. So the paper. So Hungary became from a poster country of successful transition from communism in 1989 to a black sheep of international community in the past 12 years. Still, at the recent election in April 2022, the united opposition lost 900,000 votes, which is a lot in a small country of 10 million total, in comparison to the last election in 2018. I'm arguing that this loss is mostly happening because of fundamental misunderstanding the character of illiberal polypore regime, which is using localized transnationalism, and I will talk about this localized transnationalism as far as its operation is concerned, and it is driven by illiberal pragmatism. So these are the 3 concepts I'm using in this paper: the illiberal state, the localized transnationalism, and the illiberal pragmatism. I'm still talking about the opposition. They did not have any response to this new phenomenon that gender, which serves as a symbolic glue, and reproductive rights became battlefield in this new Cold War, what we are experiencing now, and which is not that cold anymore. So this paper aims to discuss why recent developments in Hungary matter outside Hungary. And I argue here that Hungary serves as a laboratory of illiberal policies with constructing this new form of state. This localized transnationalism refers to the phenomenon of the modus operandi of this illiberal international. This concept, illiberal international, is in the literature. It's an alliance of illiberal parties, movements, and intellectuals who are developing a rhetoric together, like the anti-Soros rhetoric, concepts like the so-called gender theory, and they adopt it to national contexts using the same method, like very much like the McDonald's franchise. It really doesn't really depend on the context. The anti-George Soros rhetoric is the same. The difficulty to unpack this language has been already discussed in the previous talk, but also it raises the important problem that this polypore state is instrumentalizing previously existing concepts. And that's why it's really interesting to talk about Hungary. What is its role in the laboratory? It sets up a media agency in like the V4NA, which is replacing the Russia Today. The World Congress of Families, which I will talk about in the reproductive rights section. And there has been a lot written about how the World Congress of Families is a kind of network of, this term has been also used, unholy NGOs transmitting certain values and worldviews, and the Matthias Corvinus College. And I will talk about this latter one, the Matthias Corvinus College, which is, I think, interesting for this whole discussion. One of the founding members of the Fidesz, the ruling party, invested in an educational enterprise, having learned from his own experience, supported by George Soros, that the institutional systems of a previous political order often serve as a cradle of new political system training and new elite. This investment was spent well, and during the first Fidesz government, it donated serious estates to this investment. And from 2010, this Matthias Corvinus College receiving millions of donations from various foreign donors, and including the German Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So if you look at the webpage, and I suspect that, while I'm talking, you are looking at the webpage, you see 16 young or mostly middle-aged white male faculty listed on this flashy webpage with 0 academic publications. But this is the institution which invited Carson, who had been mentioned several times, and also to Budapest, and also the former Technical University Dresden faculty, Werner Patzelt, who was fired because of his close connections to Pegida. And in 2020, this MCC was receiving exactly the same amount of financial support as the whole Hungarian higher education. And this endowment is rivaling only with the University of Oxford. So this example is only one of those institutions, and probably the MCC, the Matthias Corvinus College, is the richest one, I would say, which are shaping the liberal scientific landscape and creating a space for value transfer. And they, at the first glance, look like scholarly institutions, but in fact, they are operating as illiberal spaces for transmitting ideas and values. And here comes the other theoretical concept, the polypore. Because the illiberal polypore state fundamentally is changing the spaces where academics and activists works. And the concept of space will be very important for me in this discussion, because without space, there is no resistance. And basically, the topic of this discussion is the two-day colloquium is to think about spaces of resistance. So in post-democracy, new political programs emerging from the re-articulation of the relationship between state and citizens who are constructing new spaces. These new spaces are placing democratic actors in an opposing binary opposition to the establishment, which has major impact on their performance. But these spaces are actually these polypore spaces. The task is very important to unpack this concept because it is a very special form of state was created, the illiberal polypore state, which the concept we created with Weronika Grzebalska, which is fundamentally changing the spaces where critical thinkers, academic, activists, basically the actors of change, operate. So this has changed the spaces for civil activism. And since this illiberal polypore state first existed inside the European Union, in Hungary, the question should be also asked about the origins and how to fight against it. We get closer to solve the puzzle if we understand that illiberal European Union states as a majoritarian nationalist response to the systemic global system of neoliberal democracy, which has shaped the relationship between individual and the state during the last decades. It is offering a viable and livable alternative to established ideologies of conservatism, liberalism, meanwhile challenging international socialism understood as the progressive European tradition. The illiberalism should not be perceived as a revival of authoritarianism, but rather as a new form of governance, resisting on previous that was Sigmund Freud, but rather a new form of governance resting on previous democratic concepts and institutions, and the one can be better understood when one goes beyond the routine comparative analysis of political systems along the East-West divide, and instead traces the gradual socio-political developments in these countries by placing them in the context of a broader global process. While post-communist democracies have their own socio-historical legacies, the fact that illiberal tendencies are increasing all across the globe suggests that they should be rather viewed as a local symptom of structural failures of the European neoliberal democratic project and the dark legacy of Europeanization in its current form. In terms of the modus operandi, the illiberal regimes can be understood as polypore states, like this parasitic organ which feeds on the vital resources of its host at the same time contributing to its decay and only produces a fully dependent state structure in return. I'm just opening a bracket. I'm slightly concerned always this biological metaphor, but since the proteins were already used, I feel much better. Bracket closed. On the one hand, illiberal polyporism involves exploiting and appropriating various aspects of the European liberal democratic project, institutions, procedures, concepts, and funding opportunities. So contrary to the popular belief, Fidesz, the Hungarian illiberal party, is not interested in leaving the European Union or rejecting its basic concepts, such as human rights or gender equality. Contrary to the popular belief, Fidesz did not invent anything new, just use the ideas, concepts, values, and more importantly, the resources of others to promote their agenda and their loyal supporters, emptying the existing concepts, ideas, and institutions. So that is the polypore, and that is the illiberal pragmatism. Rather, they wish to exploit the funding and political opportunities the European Union offers, while at the same time pursuing their own political agenda internationally as well. On the other hand, the polyporism involves the illiberal regime divesting resources from those it considered the beneficiaries of the corrupt liberal post-communist system, to use their words, the already existing human rights and civil society sector, in order to transfer it to its own base, to secure and enlarge on the domestic level. So think about the polypore which extracts the resources. Or like a vacuum cleaner. Moreover, just like the polypore usually attacks already damaged trees, illiberalism primarily rise to power in the context of weak state institutions, weak and divided progressive parties, and failing liberal democratic projects. The comparative perspective is even more urgent, as the measures first tested in the Hungarian laboratory now are being used in other countries, starting from the higher educational reforms, banning gender studies, to other policies. In the aftermath of the economic crisis in 2008, with the increased competition among the nation states in terms of their economic models, and when the absurd solutions of Hungary's so-called unorthodox economic policies, solutions such as the nationalization of the state pension system, the government price fixing in the public utility sector, are applied by now in other European countries in the hope of resolving the crisis, instead of facing the structural reasons. The same is true for the three aspects of this new form of governance: securitization, familialism, and alternative structures. So this is how the illiberal state is operating with security, securitization. Everything becomes a security issue. About parallel institutions, I started describing a parallel institution like the Matthias Corvinus College, which operates on the national level, but basically a part of the illiberal international, creating a space for other discussion. So let's see the civil society, because that's where all the hopes, the donors' hopes are attached to facilitate change. 1989 celebrated the rebirth of civil society. By now, civil society has been fundamentally transformed. Understanding this transformation is important, as the checks and balances of democratic systems were based on lively, strong NGO sphere. Now, only lobby groups remained, funded from outside sources, and of course, they are called NGOs in the illiberal states. The consolidation of the Orban government, and let me just flag that this is not only about Orban, but in other illiberal countries, this is the same process. Profoundly affected the NGO activism in the country and has reinforced negative structural trends that experts had previously failed to spot. And again, let me open a bracket here. I will put into the chat the podcast series we are doing with the friends from Johannesburg and from the US, which is a title, Sleepwalking. How sleepwalking of the different progressive actors actually led to the present crisis we are facing now, and the different titles of the podcast, Dangerous Women, Dangerous Law, Dangerous Medicine, actually discusses how this kind of discourses, ideologies, processes are instrumentalized and emptied or polyporized. I don't know if this verb exists, but it should, by the liberal actors. After taking over the state, which is described as state capture in the literature, the funding mechanisms for NGOs have been also polyporized. It looks like it is up and running. So, I mean, if you look at the CEDAW report, for example, of Hungary or Mexico or Poland, I mean, the reports are reporting about fantastically vivid sphere. But the decisions are made by loyal commissars, and those who have got chance to get funding are only the loyal commissars. The constructs on inequality, that constructs inequality and creates an alibi field. It looks like there's a flourishing NGO sphere, and international observers usually tick the box. There are NGOs. By now, when the sleepwalking is over, I'm actually arguing that this is over, and this is because of the war of Russia against Ukraine. When the sleepwalking is over, the observers are the observers are claimed that they are, by the liberal states, that they are applying a double standard, which is actually true. According to the standards they set up, these polyporgongos are doing exactly what they expected to do, just for another aim: to create an alternative legal, economic, cultural system to the liberal democracy, which is livable and desirable. The fact that the civil organizations are transformed to government-sponsored, unholy organizations fundamentally surprised academics, sleepwalking, who have been working on holy organizations. Especially that these unholy organizations are having an international outreach and they are connected to each other. Think about the World Congress of Families. Think about the Matthias Corvinus College. The different illiberal organizations have a culture of secrecy, hate, and underground feeling of being an underground organization. And they are also using this decolonizing narrative for their own purpose. So when we heard this fantastic talk about decolonizing, the illiberal actors are also polyporizing the decolonizing narrative, saying that they are colonized by Brussels and by the powerful capitalists. So that's why the polypolarization is an important concept. I think is useful to understand the creation of the narrative. So this dramatic change is based on two premises: that this electoral system is legitimate, and that the imperative aim is to maximize the number of votes, which raises the question how to dismantle this system, if ever, and definitely not applying to the strategies of the pre-war peacetime, because that belongs to the past times. I mean, as the German says, this is the snow from yesterday. In order to understand the phenomenon, we need first and foremost to understand what made Hungary a laboratory in the past years. First, the neoliberalization of post-communist and other Europe, and the weakness of the progressive alternative, it allied with neoliberal economic forces, have been long identified as main reasons for the emergence of illiberal politics, and that is also used by the Hungarian politicians. So now I'm moving to the case, the reproductive rights. Because that's the field, and that was my main argument, that's the field which was basically ignored by the Hungarian united opposition, which I'm arguing partly contributed to their disastrous electoral performance. News on attacks on reproductive rights in the US fills the headlines, while white mothers with cute white babies are smiling down from expensive billboards advertising motherhood from Hungary to Poland, Germany to Denmark, Russia to Serbia, explicitly condemning abortion. In the US, due to the well-planned, successful Republican takeover of the judicial system, the Constitutional Court criminalization of the abortion is happening. In Europe, where the regulation of reproductive rights varies from country to country, the public discourse is more about demographic decline. And I put in the chat this report we actually prepared. As a result, not only the European Commissioner with a demography in her portfolio was appointed, but illiberal governments have introduced several family policy measures to incentivize marriage by offering joint loans to bind spouses together and encouraging couples to have children with exemption from income tax. It is a very legitimate question why reproductive rights become a battlefield when the number of abortions is not only steadily declining, but is linked to social inequality. Surveys of, for example, the Hungarian Central Statistical Office show that it is mainly poor, underage women and women who already have multiple children who consider abortion as the only affordable means of birth control, since the social security system do not support any form of birth control. To make the picture even more complex, new family policies are not only securing solid electoral support, like in the recent general elections in Hungary, when there was a substantial gender gap. Women are more supporting illiberal government than men. But at the same time, there are traditional tools of classical leftist redistributive welfare politics applied by the liberal government. Polypor, right? Attacks on reproductive rights aim to reunite very different forces like conservative politicians, fundamentalist religious actors, illiberal pragmatists, and warmongers globally, gluing together. Their aim is to create a livable and desirable offer to liberal democracies. Much more is here at stake than the right to abortion. In Texas, relatives and neighbors are expected to report if they happen to have information about abortion and are authorized to sue and enforce a law even if they are not harmed. which is an introduction, a new illiberal legal paradigm to a liberal legal system. The winds of change regarding reproductive rights have been blowing for more than a decade, together with intellectual and institutional preparation for this contestation. Because of the sleepwalking, this has remained undetected. Meanwhile, progressive forces missed the obvious signs that reproductive rights are destined become battlefield. Sorry, it's already late here. And I've been teaching all day. The process that illiberal forces are not merely criticizing the different legal frameworks, but at the same time, they are building alternative institutions. Think about the Matthias Corvinus College, capturing existing institutions and existing discourses of the rights while creating a new language about reproduction largely remained under the radar of progressive actors. This contestation of neoliberal democracy can take several directions, and it offers space for discussion on crucial issues of gender equality. The difficulty lies in recognizing that while this transnational trend of contestation is happening, the all three interconnected levels, transnational, national, and local, there are spaces of resistance only on the local level. Even a national legal framework for abortion can be disabled if certain hospitals in Poland or in Hungary receive European Union funding via their respective government to improve their gynecological department only on the condition that they become family friendly, which is a coded language that they do not perform abortion. At the local level, when a public hospital in Hungary or a small municipality in Poland can declare itself to be outside the jurisdiction of the universal human rights, international treaties, European Union directives, or the national law, without any real legal or practical consequences, a new conceptualization of citizenship is needed, because certain citizens have access to public goods based on different criterion, while others do not. The very same process is happening in the US, as far as the differences in states are concerned.
So, Andrea, we should wind down.
Yes, okay. Then what can we do? The illusion, I'm sorry, I was so happy to write this paper. The illusion that 1989 would bring a general democratization is over. And family policy now is used as a way of reinstating old new divisions. As Duncan Light has pointed out in his analysis of the post-communist identities, they are driven by, I quote, a desire to construct new post-communist identities characterized by a democratic, pluralist, capitalist, and largely westward-looking orientation, end quote. Attempts by the right wing to redefine women's political space are not characterized by a democratic, pluralist, capitalist, and largely westward-looking orientation, end quote, but rather an anti-pluralist understanding. The resurfacing of anti-modernism, coupled with criticism of the spiritual and social consequences of the neoliberal capitalism, has also appropriated discourses concerning the family in order to achieve its aim, namely to create viable, livable, and desirable alternatives. And the polypolarization and the process of illiberal pragmatism actually a way to do this. This space can be also connected to anti-modernist politics and to emerging of far-right political forces. And that's why we need to rethink the roles of NGOs and gongos and the desires and fantasies related to progressive politics. Thank you, and I'm sorry for running late. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would like to ask